This is Robert Thibodeau of the Mayflower Bookshop coming at you again with Astrological Update, Astrology Predictions 2020 into 2021. So in December, there was a Mars Square Pluto on December 23rd, and this was an escalation of infighting in Washington, for instance, or the escalation of the pandemic around certain parts of the world, and perhaps in other parts of the world, a diminishing of the pandemic. And it was my thought that Jupiter conjunct Saturn would transform, whether vaccine or not, that a number of things would happen, that the pandemic would start to dissipate and disappear. And we have yet to see how that's going to work, because even though there was a Mars square Pluto December 23rd, Mars was square the Sagittarius rising United States chart Pluto. Mars was transiting Mars was square the United States natal Pluto from the 4th house to the 2nd, where Pluto is. And will this be a further escalation, or will this be a further diminishing of the pandemic? But certainly, the Mars square Pluto on New Year's Eve night into New Year's Day makes that kind of a dangerous time around the world. For Mars is guns and cars and warrior and fighting, and it can be bravado and bravery. It can be heroes. It can be standing up with courage for truth and justice in the American way. But Mars square Pluto can also be the criminal element. We've seen the bomber in Nashville, and we've seen a lot of hysterics with fighting over money and, how much money would be given to help the poor and the downtrodden who have lost their jobs or have not enough money to survive. I mean, the whole thing with Washington, D.C., and this fighting it out into New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, to say nothing of a huge storm coming to hit the United States Midwest and the East Coast, all with this Mars square Pluto, which is kind of a troublemaking thing. I mean, it's associated with feeling ripped off and raped and, injected. And Mars square Pluto with, at the same time, New Year's Eve into New Year's Day, Venus opposes Mars. Venus from Sag opposes the Mars in the United States chart in Gemini. And Mars-Pluto is like jealousy and attachment and anger. On a positive side, it's doing work on yourself and being alone, happiness when alone, cleaning your home, throwing things away, giving things away, ridding yourself of baggage that you don't really need and things that are weighing you down. And it's a deep, it's a pathological psychology aspect where people get fearful and paranoid and think too much and say negative things to, scapegoating, projecting. So all the astrological aspects have a positive and negative side. And all the planets are cyclic in that they have different times that they go around the zodiac in 360 degrees, and each planet represents a virtue or non-virtue or a sociological personification of behavior, both individually and collectively or in group. I mean, Jupiter, for instance, might be more socially orientated, whereas Saturn can be happiness when alone. So when we talk about Mars, we're talking about cars. I mean, you'd think there'd be some real bummer cars out there, and they're making some that would have to be called back when you have Mars square Pluto in the turn of the year. But you could also, if you know what you're doing, find a really good deal on a car. Mars square Pluto is a really good deal on a car if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get a lemon. So the Mars square Pluto is again, it's a very rough period from the December 23rd Mars square Pluto in the sky to the January 1st Mars squared United States Pluto. We're in this pocket of Mars-Pluto, which is really good for cleaning and clarifying and researching and alchemy and, trying to find healing. But the negative side is being pushed down further into the underworld or the unconscious negativities that have no clarity and way of getting out, you might say. People feel really trapped in their heaven and their hell these days. And I'm looking forward to the Jupiter square Uranus as we get into January, and the Jupiter trine Uranus from the Jupiter transit trine Uranus in the United States chart as you get to the latter part of January. And to me, I think this would be the breakthrough, the real breakthrough when it comes to progress and social collective happiness and freedom and truth and kind of a bigger all-American kind of way of going. There are other aspects that say other things, but I wanted to point that out, that we're in the deeps of, it's very important to have compassion and patience with each other from this pre-Christmas time to that first week of January. That Mars Pluto has, the planets actually make the aspects on a certain day, but you can feel some aspects come for weeks and a month and weeks afterwards. It has a kind of you don't just get over it. Like the light doesn't just go on and off. It's like a dimmer switch for good and bad things. And with that Venus opposing Mars that's coming here at the turn of the year, I think that we're also experiencing a lot of debate, and feelings are saying one thing, whereas talk are saying another thing, or actions are different than talk. And there's kind of a conflict between the archetypal Venus-Mars, the male-female energy, so the spiritual and material, the inner and the outer. And of course, during the solstice to January 2nd or 6th is a magical time where the inner and outer worlds can meet, spiritually speaking, that one can foresee the future and redeem the past and live in a spiritual presence by following their highest star or ideal and trying to make it practical in everyday life, to manifest as a presence and a present to unwrap in everyday life. And that takes place for those 12 days of Christmas after the solstice or after the 25th, depending on how you like to count it and depending on whether you're esoteric theosophist or Rosicrucian or anthroposophist or Masonic or, depending on your Christianity or your Buddhism. They all have a different version of it, of the Saturnalia of Rome and the celebration of the birth of light with Krishna or the Christos or the Apollo or the Odin or the Baldur. They all have a myth of a hero being born who comes around this time of the turn of the year. And we have this alchemical Mars Square Pluto, which is great for research and working on yourself, but it's really bad when we blame other people, when we don't have a certain amount of power from truth, honesty, and virtue to back up that assault or insult or projection. So we have we have a number of crazy aspects, like Neptune kind of at the midpoint between Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, which is that gives some people delusional, hallucinogenic, false imaginations and delusions and hallucinations. Other people, it might give spiritual genius. It might give like a vision for art and color and feelings and imaginative heights that haven't even been dreamed of, hardly be dreamed of. And January, on January 13th, the Mars squares Saturn, will that be the last of the tension and fear and cold and storm? What will happen when, and also besides that, what about the Jupiter square Uranus on January 17th for freedom and breakthrough? And Lilith is conjuncting the Uranus, the wild woman archetype. So I think women coming into power and women coming into high places of spiritual knowledge and wisdom and helping the world, along with social impulses for truth and freedom and love, will be kind of empowered during that mid-January time as Mars squares Jupiter, and even January 20th, Mars conjuncts Uranus. Again, right at the inauguration, this is like a crazy aspect that obviously Mars square Uranus is explosive emotions and the danger of sudden turnarounds or upturns. And many astrologers are warning us about that. But it could also be big breakthroughs with courageous statements and higher truths that invoke our will for a divine purpose. So really there's freedom in every planetary aspect. It's really important to know this. So when you get an astrology reading and when you look at these planets, it's really important. Some people say that I'm vague sometimes, or I'm giving too many options for the possibilities of the event horizon. But I think that every planet, as in my book, Astrology Aspects, the Art, there's a higher and lower octave to every planetary sequence and aspect. And it's up to each one of us to invoke the higher octave and to protect ourselves from the lower octave. Like on the end of January, Venus conjunct Pluto, January 28th on a full moon. Is that jealousy and possessiveness? Or is that a deepening of our solitude and love and our divining the divine within ourselves and each other, and our cleansing us, giving away things we're not really using so other people could use them, and gifting people. Probably gifting them with a lot of the gifts that we received. Maybe not. Gifting them with our compassion and our deeper love. So that Venus-Pluto on the full moon of January 28th goes into February 6th with Venus conjunct Saturn. I mean, that's a time to love, selflessly love, and help people that are less fortunate than yourself, and not to be just critical of everybody. Because that's going to be a tough one there. Because in Capricorn, it can be kind of cold, and negative, and blame everybody but yourself. You can't, and even if you're right, you can't help that other person. You can only change yourself. So Venus is love, and Pluto is selfless, deep connection through many lifetimes. And then Venus conjunct Saturn is wisdom of love that can last in time. If you don't get the positive side of the end of January going into February, then there's also a Venus square Uranus on the 6th, following the Venus-Saturn, and that will project you into the 11th of February with Venus conjunct Jupiter, and that will be an attempt to try something new. There's a huge struggle this year for security versus freedom, rootedness and groundedness versus some novel, new, creative thing to happen. And this has a lot to do with the Saturn square Uranus, February 17th, June 14th, and December 24th of 2021. So here we'll see pieces of it when these faster moving planets hook up to it, like when Venus conjunct Saturn and squares Uranus and around February 6th. And then later, February 17th, you have the Saturn square Uranus, which is a huge tension between authority versus a proletariat kind of mind or street mind. Saturn wants security and control. Venus wants genius or freedom. They can work together. You can be, in fact, the greatest artists have limits. They'll set their boundary. They'll set their time. I'm trying to set the time on this one, and I'm having a little trouble making it short, But the Saturn wants to set the boundary, and, there's a frame that you paint in, or there's a piece of paper that you're going to write the poem in 5 lines or 7 lines, or the poem's not going to go beyond that one page. And so the artist that's really powerful many times is one who can set a structure and have tremendous freedom within that structure. Or is it that the seed needs to be buried and die before new growth takes place? So the Saturn square Uranus is a whole year of struggling between authoritative, rich plutocrats moving into the wisdom. Is it wise that so many people are so rich? Is it wise to have so many people so poor? Is it wise not to provide education for all? Is it wise not to protect our water and air? These are Saturn wisdom concerns, to protect the little ones and to give education and protection until they're old enough to be free. And we have a lot of people that are free in their desires, but they're not free in their thinking. They're not free in their feelings. They're not free in their emotions. They're not free spiritually or in their soul. And so this is a struggle. February 17th, when Saturn squares Uranus, the moon is conjunct Uranus. So that's an impulse for freedom in the Aquarian age, and that all of us should find our place in the orchestra. You may not have the biggest instrument. You may not have the loudest instrument. But each of us plays a part in the symphony of humanity in all time, that we reincarnate according to esoteric tradition. You can look at a book called Secret Teachings of All Ages, or Isis Unveiled, or The Key to Theosophy, or Outline of Occult Science, and you can see these principles at work. So this is like the Uranus looking for some kind of new freedom, or a tap of your foot to beat out a new sense of music and not be restricted by the authorities that are at hand, or the structure that the artist is trying to impose. And now when you get to June 14th, the moon opposes Saturn and Sun squares Neptune. This might be some confusion here about what is true authority. The true authority is the authority of one's experience. Is it true, or is it based on higher truth? Is it based on higher love, groundedness? But that Sun square Neptune in mid-June can bring confusion or mistrial or misgivings. And one has to be very patient to figure out what the facts are at that time. Then we come to December 24th, when Saturn squares Uranus. This will add a lot of tension to next Christmas. Venus will conjunct Pluto on Christmas Day. Number one aspect for jealousy and possessiveness and weird emotional reactions to things, where emotions overrule the thinking. And the moon opposes Jupiter, where other people might be trying to overdo the goodness and over-celebrate. But Saturn square Uranus is trying to find a balance between a certain kind of structure and discipline meaning a sense of cleanliness and openness and healthiness, and things put in their order so that people can dance within that structure, Uranus being dance. And so all year we have this Saturn square Uranus. It's 3 times. And Saturn is in Capricorn, going into Aquarius, went into Aquarius. So it's in Aquarius, squaring Uranus in Taurus. And Uranus in Taurus is wanting to restructure security, investments, home, money. A lot of things are up. What about cryptocurrency? And is there going to be a renewed gold standard? Will the dollar hold up against the Chinese currency? There's a lot of Neptune aspects that I'm going to get to in one of these talks, a little bit this one, where Neptune has often been associated with the homogenization and socialism, and even Chinese type of socialism, of kind of like a danger of that you have to fit with the collective, and you can't be too much of an individual or you'll be removed or something or disappear. And America is based on this kind of working together, yet highly individual. And this individuation is very important to our psychology, to Jungian psychology, individuation. This idea of being a singular representative of the whole, that each of us can reflect the whole, and that the whole reflects each one of us as individuals. So this Saturn square Uranus is a big change, where new forms of computer, artificial intelligence, sci-fi type electronics and memorizations, new weaponry. We have a lot to think about with building weapons and technology that we don't have the wisdom, nor the heart, nor the mind to fully fathom the shadow effect or the pollution or the throwing into disarray the slow but sure maturation of a deep inner soul. And this is a huge problem, that the deep inner soul can't marry a much larger spiritual view that encompasses all space and time and all selves with a day-to-day lifestyle on this planet in 2021 that will honor the last 7 generations and honor the next 7 generations without terrifying us with this shadow side effect of pollution and kind of a enslavement to mediocrity and a structure that doesn't serve a healthy human being with good air, good water, nourishment, food, an education of virtue, of generosity and healthy enthusiasm, and the ability to concentrate or meditate or mediate a higher vision that we all share or carry with an everyday experience. So this is some of the struggle between wisdom and incredible creativity and technology that may not honor the future in a way that would be good for both individual and collective. And this is kind of a thing that February kind of reaches into a new era, especially the middle of February, with the Venus conjunct Jupiter, of like wanting to have a love for all things, and the Venus midpointing Pluto Neptune, February 19th and 20th, is a sense of the importance of healing the earth, or that we won't be able to live here anymore. We'll have to be spiritual beings. And a kind of a form of spirituality is at war with false religion that doesn't have God in the river, in the earth, in the backyard, in every social meeting of two people where they meet, that the Christos, the Buddha, the holy should be there. And when we go into February 19th and 20th with Mars square the Pluto-Neptune midpoint and Venus square the Pluto-Neptune midpoint, it's kind of a crazy time. The sun is at the Pluto-Neptune midpoint around the 10th or 13th of February. So February is like a really important time for reconciliation, like where one can kind of see whether they're contributing to a better world or just their own personal pleasure and misery, and a few others. Mars will trine Pluto near the end of February, giving a certain form of power to impulses that are good, true, and honest, perhaps. So that brings us to this turn of events. And I have to say that I'm not saying much about March, but at the end of March, there's a wonderful Jupiter conjunct Neptune Pluto. And this is a collective spiritual experience of the world. Like many people will see their angel or the other person's angel, and many people will find a humanitarian, compassionate, all-embracive love instinct that is universal, that has a higher truth, and that invokes our deeper heart, both individually and collectively, at that end of March. Many people may experience a doomsday, like end of the world significator or event or sigil, but many of us are going to experience a very deep, profound spiritual experience of our more eternal self that is a golden thread that moves through our many lifetimes, a golden thread that moves through our many days, a sense of stillness and honoring each other that we may not have experienced for quite a while. And this Jupiter conjunct Saturn in Aquarius leads us into this end of March experience. And I just want to add a little more, that the solstice, which is an indication of the year, had a moon conjunct Neptune in Pisces. And of course, Rudolf Steiner and Edgar Cayce, the great psychics, spiritual psychic. I mean, you could be psychic and not spiritual. You might be able to read a person's numbers on their house or what color their underwear is, or some trivial event of the past days or the future day. But spiritual psychism, spiritual clairvoyance or clairaudience, is having a spiritual perception that actually enhances and awakens a greater participation with one's stillness and one's creativity and the whole of one's life. And this is a little different. You can be psychic and not spiritual. You can be spiritual and not psychic. You could just be a holy person that can't really see where things are going and can't see the color of the aura. So the moon Neptune is a lot of people are becoming psychic this year. The question is whether it's spiritual, virtuous, and meaningful and purposeful to the future and redeems the past, or is it just an escape? And I think the moon Neptune, with the massive amounts of medications and drugs around the world, the moon Neptune signifies many who are escaping, but also many who are finding true spirituality. And the Mars in Aries is square Pluto is a strong initiative to break free of that which binds us and holds us down in the underworld. Because the Mars is leaving the square, leaving Pluto conjunction. It's a waxing square. And having said that, you might say that the Saturn square Uranus is a waxing square too. And so not a waxing, but a waning. The Saturn square Uranus is a waning square, which means that Saturn is coming back to Uranus. So in other words, materialism and authorities are having to realize that they're going to have to change to continue living a mental, emotional, or a physical or a spiritual life. And that the Saturn's returning to Uranus. In other words, the authority and the structures are going back to those original freedom impulses we had to see how we did, to give us a grade, to see how did we create forms that were like the chrysalis of the worm that transforms into the butterfly? Did we create forms where the lead is transformed into the gold and the silver of thinking and the practicality of love and truth in the earth realm? So we also have, during this solstice chart, we have Venus in Sagittarius kind of squaring that Neptune. It's off by 11 degrees, but that's a harmonic of a hard aspect, right? 11 and a quarter and 22 and a half and 45, something like that. I'm roughing it. And then 90 and 180. Okay, so the Venus in Sag is where love has to have a higher intelligence to go with the physicality and emotions and the mental. The Venus in Sag is a higher-minded and also a strong wish to travel. I mean, you'd think that traveling is going to open up to a lot of places, and we would think that with that Jupiter-Uranus later in January, that we're running into a really beautiful time that's going to free us from a lot of the worries that we've had this last crazy year. And we're going to have kind of a new zeitgeist, a new wave to catch of creativity and freedom that we haven't seen in quite a while, like especially later January and when that Jupiter trines the Uranus in the United States chart. We're going to see that come to birth. So I wanted to say that little bit of predictions, and I'm hoping that we can learn not to just demonize people with Pluto, and that we can carry a sense of bliss, void, emptiness, compassion, love, truth, and that Neptune isn't fantasizing stuff where we're always let down all the time, but it's idealizing and indulging in the highest spiritual dream that we can like manifest in art into our life and heart into our life. And Uranus isn't just going through changes where nothing really changes and rearranging the room but never changing ourselves. It's not an estrangement or just an upset. It's a resetting of an inner impulse to learn and rightly acknowledge truth that holds all of us and not just facts that we manipulate for our desires and fears. And that Saturn isn't just justifying and rationalizing, that Saturn isn't just trying to solidify and freeze everything into a form that gives us a false sense of security, but Saturn is a realization of acceptance and forgiveness of our ignorance and stupidity and our delusions of the past. Saturn is the discipline to be able to hold the truth of the future and to work for the benefit of the world, which includes ourselves, and ourself, which includes the world. And that Jupiter isn't just going along for the fun. Jupiter is not just looking good and having a piece of wealth, but Jupiter is the commonwealth and the wisdom that the earth belongs to all of us and shouldn't be taken for granted and should be cared for by all of us. And that Venus is an archetype when it works with certain other planets. Venus is the archetype of the warrior goddesses, and both light and dark like Hecate. And Mars is the Michaelic alchemy of transforming negative to positive and pushing down the negativities and raising up the positives and working with Artemis, the archer. So then with Mercury, Hermes rather than the trickster, and the merchant of beneficent goods that help heal and purify and bless us rather than just selling us things that we don't really use and help weigh us down. So there's a whole positive side to the planetary aspects that we'll go into further. And please feel free to donate $20 or more for this series of astrological insights into 2021 from 2020 with Robert Thibodeau of Mayflower Bookshop. And you can donate by sending a check to Mayflower Bookshop at 2645 West 12 Mile in Berkley, Michigan, 48072. Or you can use PayPal using the email address mflower, like M like in Mary, and the word flower, mflower, one word, mflower, at AOL.com. And you can check out mayflowerbookshop.com is my website where a monthly prediction newsletter usually appears. And you can check out Mayflower Bookshop, Robert Thibodeau, singer-songwriter, astrologer, on YouTube, where you can hear new songs like Keep a Little Space in Your Heart for Me. And you can hear talks on the metaphysical meaning of Santa and the New Year, as well as astrological predictions for the sun sign and more. Okay, this is Robert. I hoped I've helped enlighten you a little bit, and I hope that I've educated you about a couple things. Education means educe or to free or to rise up from or something, give light to. And I hope I helped edify you for your journey, nourished you in your mind, soul, and heart for your journey. And if I wasn't able to enlighten, educate, or edify, I surely hope I was entertaining you. So bless your heart, and I'll meet you again here. You can find me at Mayflower Bookshop, at mayflowerbookshop.com, or on YouTube. Bless your heart. Bye.